Hey, tennis fans, you're listening to Match Point Canada, the official podcast of Tennis Canada. We're also members of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Ben Lewis, joined alongside Mike McIntyre, and we are now halfway through our first Grand Slam of the tennis season, the Australian Open Down Under in Melbourne.
And this week, to help us break down all of these things, plus a whole lot more, is a former professional Canadian tennis player, a well-respected coach both at the professional and junior level, someone with a top 10 sense of humor, and who has been a regular on the podcast. We're really lucky to be joined once again by Rob Steckley.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hopefully you shamelessly plug a few claps, applause. I got my daughter right in front of me, and she's gonna clap for me.
Nice, nice. We'll throw in some of that applause behind the scenes. I think we can add that in later. And forgive me, I should have said top five sense of humor, Rob. Your sense of humor is terrific, and it's one of the things that we love having you on about, and just when we bump into you in person as well at various tennis events. And I think it's something that's also served you so well as a coach. But we'll get to the coaching questions a little later. For right now, just to start, what's new and exciting in your life, both tennis and otherwise, that you can share with us and our listeners today?
I mean, off topic, I don't know if you can see behind me, but there is a serious rental going on at the house. The wife wants to be happy, so we're just trying to make her happy by extending some of the living quarters. But outside of that, I've been traveling predominantly all 2023, but kind of in ghost mode, and doing predominantly, like I said, I think the last time we talked was all Canadians. So I've been really trying to focus on Canadian tennis, and yeah, just trying to see my family as much as possible and trying to figure out the balance there. So I think the last year has been pretty decent for me, and watching my kids grow up, and also aiding in some of the Canadian new talent.
Yeah, and Rob, you and I obviously have a lot of conversations because he's been by helping out at the Thornhill Park Tennis Club where I coach part-time and giving his insights and help to some of our junior players. I always wonder when a Grand Slam comes around and you have that experience and pedigree at the highest level, coaching in that type of environment, what it must be like. Is there a different type of pressure you would feel as a coach when you're say stepping on the grounds in Melbourne or at the All England Club? Do you feel a different sense of pressure in that environment? And say you were down under right now, would you have any type of different approach or philosophy to coaching at a major compared to anywhere else?
I mean, you try to shade out all of that exterior pressure because it's just another day in the office. But we know going into these types of slams that there's a ton of pressure and the expectations are high. So it's trying to minimize a lot of that distraction is probably the most important. So for me as a coach, the job is always to try to keep it as casual as possible, knowing that everybody knows that, the first slam of the year is always the most important, and you're always judged upon, what you've done in the preseason leading into this, and everybody kind of makes their own assumptions as to how your year will go. So that's kind of what's on the players' minds, as, along with us coaches. So there's always that added pressure, but for me, truly, I don't buy into it. I just live every day kind of vicariously through my player and make them, kind of see what's on the other side of if there are results or if there aren't results. And that's kind of the most important, is the progress and the journey. So I try to keep it as loose as possible, knowing that, there's all this exterior pressure. And I think I found a pretty good way, using humor, hard work and just a bunch of substance. And I think the players buy into that. And that's the most important.
Yeah, I sort of wonder with particular players who they, sort of adapt to the pressure or they struggle within the pressure. And sometimes I wonder if certain players almost get caught in these negative holding patterns. For example, Maria Sakkari just going out early in Melbourne. She hasn't been past the third round of a slam since reaching the fourth round at Australia last year. And she's obviously one of these top 10 players who's not getting it done in majors. Have you dealt with any players who you can sense like there's a negative energy in certain environments? And I don't know if you had to put your coaching goggles on with a player like Zachary, what would you think about managing something like that?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, that their team has been a long-standing team, you know, so they have a lot of history, and clearly it's evident that you know, she I guess has a lot of weight going into Australia and struggles, and a lot of players, that's kind of the common theme amongst everybody, is they don't particularly like certain aspects of certain tournaments, and then going in, you already know it, you know, you're in a hole and you got to dig it out. So that's for that team to figure out. I have always kind of sat back and watched whoever I've worked with to talk about these conversations loosely or right in front of my face, you know, just shoving it in, saying they don't like to be here. So you know, it's for the coach and the, you know, the player and those conversations to kind of dissect and figure out why or why not, you know. And so yeah, Sakari, hopefully she'll figure it out. I mean, she's good enough, obviously, but she's got a lot of weight. I mean, she puts a lot of pressure on herself. So that's just something that that's in her character, and that's probably why she stayed pretty consistent with her career. But as far as, obviously, I think the conversations amongst everybody are why not and why hasn't she done probably a little bit better is the question. And I think that if she could find a space where she doesn't care as much, I think she'll find a little bit more success. If I'm making sense, I'm not sure. Please clarify.
Do you
Totally.
feel like every coach has a shelf life? I mean, you're talking about Zachary and having a team that's been with her for quite a long time. I know in the hockey world and professional sport world, they say, you know, coaches are hired to be fired, that inevitably at some point you're going to be turfed, and usually in a team sport, before major changes happen with the players on that team. In a coaching relationship in tennis, it's different. The coach is not, there's no general manager there to fire the player or trade the player because you're working for yourself. But do you think there's something to be said that at some point every player should seek outside voices, a new voice, a new perspective?
Ooh, yeah, that's a sensitive topic because as a coach, you know, I deal with that constantly, and you would not want those conversations to have as a selfish, you know, reason. But externally, if you're looking in, yeah, there's always a shelf life, and teams become pretty comfortable. But you don't want to kind of dissect too hard and you know, feel like, you know, there's an issue, and probably, you know, the problem solving in that is to find exterior help. And you know, I know that for me, when I'm in those scenarios, I just really try to do my best to focus on how I can improve or connect with the player as much as possible and bring as much value, but also bring in outside help. So I'm not a stranger to try to, you know, have a lot of outside conversation, trying to figure out who I can bring in and maybe what others would be feeling, and, you know, on their end as to what they would change, and maybe, you know, their philosophies, and I could try to bring that in. So as long as you're open-minded. So, you know, in her case, I don't know. I don't want to be, you know, point
I don't mean
fingers.
specific. Yeah, I don't mean specific to Zachary. I'm not saying like, hey, should she seek a new team? But just sort of generally speaking, you know?
Yeah, well, generally speaking, I mean, just, I think if everybody keeps an open mind and the coach is very aware of that, and, you know, they're not sensitive as to this is my method and it's only my method, then I don't think they should be, you know, threatened by the fact that there could be outside help. I think that most tour players kind of have conversations. I know on a daily, after matches, before matches, everybody's kind of chatting and talking and seeing what's up. And I know that's, for me, that's my case. So I think that's just a general consensus of, trying to make sure that you're open-minded.
Start of the tennis season, and everyone's had a very brief off season, but there's this sense of optimism at the start of a new year. I think probably for all players that it's going to be different from the year before, that they're going to make changes, there's going to be growth and improvements. Of course, you get a couple of tournaments into the season, and already some are not having the results maybe they hope to have. Um, how in the early part of the season do players sort of manage those? And as a coach as well, how would you manage a player who's not having the start that they hope for and maybe anticipated?
That's every coach and player's worst fear is, doing a preseason, going in super amped. Everybody's, excited to start the season, but also with that hanging over their shoulders, the what if I don't start, the way we should. And again, I talk a lot about this, when we have these conversations. It's more about like trying to just continue the journey. And if you can buy into that as a team, it's not really about starting the season, must need to do, the best possible out of that beginning. As long as you've had a good preseason, where you're taking your game, where you're taking, the next chapter of, leading into February and Doha and Dubai and so on and so forth. I feel like that's the most important. And as long as you're mature as a team and you guys really have talked things through and you know where you're going, the results are going to come. And inevitably, I think if you guys are that open, results will come because you're going to be faced with pressure at the very beginning of the year. Everybody does. That's the most important. All eyes are on the beginning, first slam of the year, and who's doing what and those types of conversations. So as long as you can tune things out, stay in your camp and stay progress focused, things typically run the course, whether you've exited a little bit unlucky at the beginning. I'll tell you one thing, when I was working with Lucie, we were sitting, I think it was third or fourth round of Aussie. It was center court and she was playing Li Na. She had triple match point. She lost. And the ball we thought was in. It was called out last minute. Long story, probably long, is she went on to win the tournament, and Lucie and I had to sit there while we played doubles, and that was that. And it was like the most gutting feeling ever, but we knew we made progress, and we had to listen to all these conversations of, if she closed a little bit sooner when she needed to be. Those would have distracted us and we would have been off course, but we knew that after, the heartbreaking loss, we kind of analyzed and we knew where we were going. And sure enough, the remainder of the year was a positive. Everything kept getting better and better, and we kept getting more progress in the game, and we knew exactly where we needed to be and dialed in and so on and so forth. So I think that's the most important, and try to, as a unit, as a team, not looking too much into the immediate, because everybody's going to try to dissect that, and it's for a team to understand where you're taking them.
That's a really interesting story, and actually, we just saw Li Na on site. I think congratulating Zhang Xinwen on reaching the round of 16, and it was 10 years ago in 2014. I guess a decade ago, Li Na won that big Australian Open title. Mentioning Lucie Safarova, obviously you have that experience coaching high-profile players, and I wonder for Safarova, working with Denis Shapovalov, Yulia Putintseva, players have been, top 10, top 20, top 30, and going on, as you say, like a journey in their process with them. Can you identify like a tangible difference sometimes between the players who are, getting to the top 25, top 10 and staying there, and the players who are not getting there, who are maybe hovering outside the top 100 or not breaking through, if there is a tangible difference, really.
I mean, first and foremost is self-belief. That's, you know, for me, that's the most important. If they believe in themselves and they have chosen to believe in their coaching staff. As you know, moving past that now, is, you know, the relentlessness of being okay with getting better and being uncomfortable. Okay, that's, you know, I think number two. Number three is they keep it between the coach, the staff, and themselves. There's no outside conversations. I think that's what we were talking about a couple questions ago. You know, there's this level of communication and respect that those types of players have, and they really believe and you know, and hold value. They understand what it is that you and the or the coach and the player and their staff has discussed on the table, and they know what direction they're taking. So I think letting in outside voices is pretty common theme, you know, when you see somebody that's trailing 30 and 40 and 50. I mean, you can go lack of money, you can go yeah, just a lack of awareness, but I think that's pretty standard. And I think at the top of my list is I've always been fortunate to have players that I've been out on tour that truly have conversations and we're talking openly, constantly. And I find that that's kind of what I'm maybe struggling or learning to deal with now when I'm working with more juniors or transition players. There's so many voices, and it's so hard because I'm only one guy, and you know, the team should be made up of small numbers. You know, there could be, you know, the player and whatnot, but yeah, I find that there's so many people talking to so many other people, which make it so much more challenging to get your point across, because there are 400 million other points to get across if you're listening to other people. So yeah, I think that that's what and those are able to do is listen to somebody that they are listening to, and they're going to stick with that, whether that's right or wrong, you know. So I even saw something, or maybe you saw that, Holger Rune hires Bozo, which is Boris Becker.
Yeah.
I thought his nickname was Boom Boom.
You know, and I felt bad for Boris. I mean, I know where that's coming from, but Boris Becker is Boris Becker. He knows what he's talking about. And that's kind of what, you know, the public eye will do to a coaching relationship if they haven't done, you know, what I guess everybody expects them to do, especially somebody like Boris, you know, who I guess has a past, also has played at the highest level, coached at the highest level, and Holger, who's an aspiring maybe top one, you know, top three in the world, who is looking to be world number one. And it's just funny to see. That's what those conversations get to a point where everybody's talking about, you know, Ozo the clown.
Yeah.
I don't know. I saw that and I just had a good laugh.
Oh, totally. Totally. That was definitely one of the more fascinating coaching hires. I want to ask you about, you know, composure, handling pressure. I'm actually going to share a brief anecdote with Rob from me playing on court and you helping out in the summertime. We have a Wednesday match day once a week at our Thornhill Park club. And I was playing one of the juniors on one of the courts Rob was coaching. And I think I was up, you know, 5-2 or 5-3, trying to serve out the set and feeling comfortable and relaxed throughout the set, playing good tennis, and suddenly you get to the point where you're trying to close it out, and suddenly the nerves hit for no reason. It's a practice set. I don't know why I'm getting nervous, but I am. And Rob notices it, and it's love 30, and notices sort of I've suddenly changed something about my serve. He's like, well, you're not, holding your tossing hand up anymore. It's dropping and you're rushing. Just sort of relax. So I took a deep breath and I relaxed, and then I served out the set. Um, you know, this isn't my experience there, and you helped me out. I don't think that's uncommon as a player where that sort of sets in. You know, how do you, I suppose, we saw, Anna Blinkova save 8 match points, beat Rybakina this past week. We saw 16-year-old Mira Andreeva come back from 5-1 down and win a huge match. How many discussions would you have with players in terms of pressure moments, staying composed where you feel the tension rising so much, especially if you're, playing in these huge stadiums with thousands of people watching?
Yeah, Blinkova, those examples they're running off of adrenaline and, new experiences. So they're going to handle those experiences actually probably better than ones that have been in there just a little bit, and then you'll go into those veterans who absolutely understand those scenarios. But it's a common conversation. You're going to experience that. We know going into a match that it's never ever going to be as easy as just closing a match out. So it's and a player, and you understand. I think that's where having a very close, open relationship is the most important. I think that's number one. And from my experience, all of my players, we understood, especially me going into matches and analyzing my player and kind of living vicariously through them on and off the court. You develop an awareness of their yips, so to speak. And, in your case, I could easily point out that the fact of the matter was you are not concentrating on what is allowing you to get to that point. You're now, lack of focus has dropped and you're just trying to close. So there's no awareness, no focus. So the simple thing is to get back to that. So for me as a coach, you have to have some sort of cues and understanding going into a match whether it's being down breaks or going up breaks, closing it out. There are simple commands that you and your player will have, and you guys can really rely on those things. And my specific thing was always having them come to the corner if we're fortunate enough to have that. And they'll go to the towel, and you'll just say some simple command words. Breathe, toss, legs, look forward, get after them, whatever it is, and those simple little, commands, if you guys have an honest relationship and you guys really understand each other, they go a long way, because it's not going to correct and, you're going to play the best tennis, but it's going to allow the player to slow down just enough to possibly get a little bit of luck on their side. And that's where, if you can capitalize, close, break, or hold serve, then you have that whole relief of like, okay, now what do I do? And then you can have those conversations again and kind of get back to work.
The key thing I took from that anecdote, Ben, was that you are definitely a proponent of on-court coaching, I guess. Is that
I
right?
am 100% all in on court coaching.
How did it
Absolutely.
work? How did it work out in that situation? Did you close out the practice set or what?
I did close out the practice set, actually. I did. And I think at that stage it was love 30. And then, after that little tip, I mean, it's all, I, I think about this sometimes in sport in general with tennis and other sports of what sort of clutch is or delivering in the moment. And I think delivering in the moment is actually, it's really just about trust in your ability and your skill set, believing that you can produce your skill set in those kind of key moments. So that worked out there. I'm not sure it would have if Rob isn't behind me because maybe I don't slow down and suddenly you give up the break and sets and matches can turn really quickly. So I'm grateful for that.
I need Rob to come hang out on the public courts of Mimico with me and offer some advice through the chain link fence. That's what I need. That's my level of, you know.
Fence.
Uh, Rob, my last question for you before we pass it over to some of our listeners who submitted some questions through social media for you. Probably the hardest questions you're going to face tonight. Is aside from Ben Lewis, who are the other young Canadians that you were working with in 2024? Primarily, what's your plan for this year, and who are some of the names that you're looking after?
Well, I mean, truthfully, my schedule's unclear. I haven't really nailed down exactly, who and what the projects are this year. So I'm actually waiting from, um, I guess, Tennis Canada just to kind of award me what is happening. But conversations, obviously, I'm not really going to speak about, but there are a ton of conversations about, amongst myself and other players privately that, could take flight. But for now, all I'm doing is focusing on my family, staying home, working on Ben's game. We got a great group at Thornhill, and I have a lot of ghost conversations right now. I just say ghost because it's probably the easiest term, to kind of clarify what is happening and where things will take me. But it looks like I'll be heading out on the road shortly.
To
And
I
Mimico.
like it.
To Mimico.
to Mimico.
Yeah, yeah, that's the next trip in store. I'll get to our fan questions.
Yeah, honestly,
Sorry, go ahead.
my schedule right now is interesting because usually I know exactly what I'm doing. And I think that's where I'm learning to be okay with not knowing what is happening and kind of bouncing around a little bit, which I think in the world of where I am now, that's like a normality. Whereas before you're working with somebody that you know exactly what the schedule is, you're dialed in, and that's it. So I think the unfamiliar is pretty familiar, if that makes sense, to this stage, but I'm still just trying to get used to it a little bit where it's, yeah, you're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but the schedules come to me, then I handle it and off we go. But until then, yeah, we're just being family, man.
Yeah,
Working on the
I,
house.
I like
Working on,
that.
that's
Um, I'll give us our fan questions here. This is one from Shiela. She asks, "What techniques do you use to get a player out of a slump?"
woo.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a hard question because you don't really know. I mean, it depends on what that player personality is,
Hmm.
and um, typically, from my experience, I've always had the, pleasure of working with people that I'm able to, develop a friendship, and it's not as much on court as it is off court, and developing that friendship and bond, and then using humor and developing confidence and and probably believing in the system of what we want to achieve and what we want to improve. And so breaking down a list of things that they can, I guess we can have as tangibles and see on a day-to-day. And I think that's what's a little bit easier working with pros at the highest level is they can understand where the improvements are going. Maybe there's a little bit of a lag, but they can feel themselves getting better, and they know that, in a couple months that's going to translate into success. So I hope that answers things.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously not just one foolproof technique, right? I'll give us one more question here. This is from Chantal. She asks, what are your current thoughts on Denis Shapovalov? Can he get back to the top 20?
how can he not? I mean, the kid's such a charismatic character. There's no way that he's not going to be top 20 again. I mean, it's just a matter of if he has plans in between his marriage and his whatever he's got going on. But I know that he's been working hard, and you'll see him back in the top 20. There's no doubt.
There's hopeless talent, and then there's top 20 talent. And yeah, Denis definitely falls into that top 20 talent for sure. We hope he can capitalize and solidify that and move back towards that as he comes back from injury. Rob, so great to have you back with us here. You're one of our all-time favorite guests. We know that every time you're with us, we're going to have a good time. We're going to get some great insight, both from your time coaching the juniors and the professional players. And so, as wide open as 2024 seems right now for you, I'm sure that schedule is going to fill up quickly, especially if people are listening into this interview with us. So thanks for taking the time. Good luck finishing off that massive reno, and we look forward to chatting with you again this year.
Yeah, don't remind me about this reno. Oh my, jeez. But everybody will be coming over for some tennis once everything's done. So that's the
Perfect.
that's the end goal, is tennis on the estate.
Sounds good. We look forward to it. Thanks again, Rob. Take care, bud.
Thanks.